Hi guys, my name is Girish, the host for Back2Basics. Another Back2Basics for another week on the season 2. Hope you're enjoying all the episodes that I've done so far on season 1. Keep on subscribing, keep on commenting as much as you can, and it'll be good, bad, ugly, either way. It'll make my show strong. And remember the 3 things, and I'm going to mention that towards the end of the episode, so figure that out. And I think you know already, but we'll figure that out later. So today's guest, I'm so excited because I've been trying to get him since season 1, and it seems like he's too busy traveling all different places of what he does or what he does not do. We'll figure that out when we get on the call today. His name is Deon Joseph, that is, and I'm telling you, he is a powerhouse guy that I just met, and he's an amazing person. So let's celebrate Deon on this call today. Deon, how are you? Thanks for coming to Back2Basics.
I'm blessed and I'm happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad we were finally able to connect.
Yeah, absolutely. From season 1 till season 2, we're finally here. So thank you again for coming, and I really wanted you to be here to explain to people what you do or what you don't do. So we'll figure that out as we go along. But before we get into the episode of all the questions that I have for you, what does Back2Basic mean to you?
Well, getting back to reality, I think in today's society, we've gone too far to the right and to the left, or we've become more of a subjective society where we look at things with our feelings, but we eliminate facts. You know, I always say any noble efforts you want to do, that's wonderful, but your heart is the catalyst for all these noble things you want to do, and your heart is where you feel. But you have to use your head to get it done. You have to look at realistically what's happening, so when you do engage in your noble efforts, you won't end up hurting people in the long run. So we got to get back to the basics of looking at the facts and reality before we respond to an issue, so we can respond to that issue in an appropriate manner that doesn't cause more harm later. That's how I see it.
Yeah. Thank you again, by the way, for coming here on my episode. It seems like I've asked this question to every guest of mine on season 1, and it looks like I get different perspectives when it comes to the same question over and over again. So thank you again for your perspective and your input on that.
Right.
So Deon, thank you again for coming. Now, you have been in the law enforcement for the last, 25 plus years. And
25 years, sir.
25 years. And I salute you for the stuff that you do, or I should say did before. So how did you transition over to the law enforcement all the way down to what you're doing today?
Well, I'm still engaged in law enforcement. I'm still an active law enforcement officer, but every now and then they give us days off.
Okay.
And on those days off, I wanted to use that as an opportunity to create a platform for me to speak freely on some of the most important issues that we're facing today, whether it be crime, whether it be homelessness, and now, even politics. I wanted that free voice. In my uniform, I'm kind of hampered because I'm not allowed to be political, and understandably so. That job should be void of any politics one way or the other. But when you see the troubles of the world, on your days off, you don't want to be sitting on the bench when the world is burning. You want to get out there and try to help in any way you can through your voice, through a platform. And that's what I do. On the side, I engage in public speaking. I consult law enforcement agencies on issues relating to homelessness, community policing, to try to bridge the gap, that ever-widening gap between law enforcement agencies and our communities. That's important to me to heal this country moving forward in the future.
Yeah, thank you again. So Deon, you've always been in the law enforcement for many years, right? But was there a trigger or something that you wanted to be a speaker, or you saw a gap and that's how you filled it? Or
yes, I remember clearly. I have a job. My job title at my job is senior lead officer, and basically my job is to liaison with community members and help them understand the realities of our job, what we can do for them, what we can't, and come up with creative crime fighting strategies. So I was speaking the whole time, but what I noticed that when I stopped reading from books, when I stopped reading from department mumbo jumbo and their wording, and I started coming from the heart, people were really reacting to it. So one day, it was about 2015, I'm laying in bed with my wife, and I woke up and I said, "Baby, I think I want to be a speaker." And she goes, I think you should. You have an amazing impact on people when you talk, and that was it. I was looking at the world that I was working in. Homeless people were suffering. And I remember being told by my agency, hey, there's certain things you can't say. There's certain things you can't show. You mean I can't tell the truth to the public about what's happening out there? And that was it for me. I needed a way to get out there and speak and share with the world what's happening to our brothers and sisters experiencing homelessness, what's happening to good police officers across this country, and how the communities are being negatively impacted when police officers' hands are tied in trying to protect them. And the only way I could do that was through public speaking, and I was inspired to do that as a result.
Yeah. Thank you again, by the way, Deon, for that. How do you turn on and turn off from becoming a law enforcement guy versus a speaker? I mean, there has to be a disconnect somewhere, right? Because there are certain things you cannot say as a law enforcement guy because you are a government employee versus, a public speaker for the people. How do you disconnect between the two?
It's a fine line that I dance on. There's no doubt about it. I have to be really careful. But what I always tell myself is I didn't leave my First Amendment rights at the door when I joined the police force. And that's what helps me to disconnect and be free with the people that I talk to on a daily basis or wherever I travel across the country, or whether it be a college campus or a church. I easily can disconnect, but in the back of my mind, I'm always leery of making sure that I'm not representing my agency, and not that their ideas are not good and that they're not good or bad ideas. But, I have to let people know, I think it's wrong for me not to tell the people the truth. So I'm easily able to disconnect from something that is deeply woven into me, no matter what I do on or off duty. So it's a delicate balance, but I've done it pretty well. I haven't gotten in trouble yet.
Okay. Thank God. Thank God for that, right, Deon?
Yeah. I've been warned a couple of times, but I know my rights. I know what I'm allowed to say and what I'm not. And I'm still an American citizen who's covered by the First Amendment on many issues. So I have to be brave and speak out. I have to be bold and tell the public the truth, because they're not going to hear it anywhere else.
Yeah. Thank you again, Deon, for the stuff that you do and the public speaking that you do. So now, what is Deon for the next, let's say, 5 years? Because it seems like you have done so much in 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
So
wow.
Go ahead, please.
Next 5 years, I'm hoping to maybe retire in 3. That's the goal, and things are looking pretty good there. But the next 5 years, I'm looking to continue to spread my tent, as they say, increase my influence, and maybe I might even lose my mind and run for political office. I have so many people coming up to me saying, Deon, run for this, run for that. And I always say, no, honest men don't win elections. But I watched what happened this last election cycle, and I'm looking and I'm going, you know what? Someone like me might actually have a shot. Someone who's centered, someone who's not left or right, someone who just truly, genuinely cares. I have no agendas. My only agenda is to heal people and heal our nation. And maybe people will see my heart and do that. So, and tap into that. So maybe in 3 years, looking into politics, whether it be running for Congress or the Senate, or maybe even losing my mind and running for the governor of the state. Who knows? I don't know.
Well, but don't forget us in Back to Basics, and be in the loop if you don't mind. That we would like to know your journey too, what's going to go on later in the future. So thank you again for that. So Deon,
absolutely.
So let me ask you this: there's a lot of crimes around the world, a lot of racial things happening. How angry are you when these things happen, and is there a way to fix this? Because sometimes it seems like the way we're going in life in the last in 2022 and 2021 and 2020, in the last 3-4 years, we have noticed a whole bunch of hate crime and a lot of discrimination crime, racial crime. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that we're just gone too sensitive, or what are your thoughts on this?
I think we're trying to fight hatred with more hatred.
Exactly.
Everybody talks about racism, and racism is a real thing. Racism is a human trait that is, in my opinion, it's not going anywhere. You can't stamp it out. Wherever you stamp it out of one person, that spirit jumps into another group of people. We become tribal. And I believe when we dive into our tribes, when we engage in tribalism, it ends up resulting in cannibalism. Because we get in our tribes, we get in our silos, we start hating on other tribes, and then once we've decimated that tribe, we go and find another tribe to cannibalize. So trying to end racism is noble, but you end it through one-on-one conversations with people. You don't end it with broad brush paintings of other individuals. You don't end it by saying that a whole race of people or a certain profession is inherently racist. Because what you do is you end up creating angst in the heart of the individuals that you're targeting who may not actually be racist. I always tell people, do you know what? I was talking to a group of college kids the other day, and they were so hyped up on racism. I said, can anybody tell me what the definition of racism is? Not one person in a class could cite the definition of the word racism. And I said this. I said, racism is this. It's when you believe that your race is so superior and you take that sense of superiority and purposely try to harm others based on that sense of superiority. That's racism. Now I ask everybody, raise your hands if you as an individual has ever used your race to try to hurt somebody who's just because they're not you. Not one person raised their hand. I said, so, okay, class, pay attention. You've all been absolved of being a racist. Okay?
Right.
Now, racism does exist. We've had that throughout history. It exists. It's a human trait. It's not a cop trait. It's not a white trait. It is a human trait. Now, unfortunately, when certain groups of people have larger amounts of power, they're able to do more damage as a group. But we're not supposed to judge individuals based on their groupings. We're not supposed to do that. We're supposed to judge people by the content of their character. And what we're doing is we're fighting one form of racism, and now we're embracing a socially acceptable form of racism, saying that I have the right to persecute you because of your skin color. I have the right to tell one group that they're victims and tell another group that they are the oppressors. Like they're doing this in schools with children now. And that's wrong. It's a socially acceptable form of racism, and it's just as evil as racism.
Yeah. Thank you again, Deon. So give me 1 second here. Let me talk to my audience 1 second. So there are two things that I've learned by talking to Deon. There are two things. One is that he's a law enforcement guy, sees a gap between us citizen versus a law enforcement, and that's where he placed himself to speak with others, to be more interactive with people. That's what I've learned. The second thing is, when he talked about racism, there are two things that I have learned, not from Deon, but someone else. Someone did mention racism is not black, white, yellow, red, anything like that. There are two types of racism, which is good and bad. And that's the human level. And I think that's what Deon was trying to say. I hope that's what he said. So let's go back to Deon and let's figure that out. Deon, is that correct?
Yeah, well, there's no such thing as good racism.
Exactly.
That's the one thing I want to make extremely clear. But some people think that if you paint people with a broad brush, if you engage in this kangaroo court where just because you're white or just because you're a cop, you're automatically a racist, that's dangerous. Okay, and what that creates is another form of racism that ends up being socially acceptable. It ends up in college campuses where they're telling kids, oh, you're white, therefore you're an oppressor. You're black, therefore you're a victim. And it creates a wider chasm. So, but it's accepted. It's an acceptable form of judging people based on their skin color, not on the context of their character. So what I'm saying is there's no such thing as good racism. And there are some people who actually believe that this form of racism is good because we're getting rid of the bad form of racism. There's no such thing as good racism. So, what I'm saying is that it all needs to stop.
So do you think I should rephrase myself and say good people and bad people?
There you go. Yes, absolutely. Let's just put it like this. There are good, most America. I always talk about, when we're talking about policing, okay? When people ask me about are all cops racist, I say, you know what? Police officers are nothing more than a microcosm of society, okay? And by that I mean, I'd say raise your hand if you believe that in the United States of America, that out of 330 million people, there are decent people, whether they're white, black, gay, straight, atheist, Christian, Hindu, whatever, that all those people, gay people, transgender people, most of those people, the vast majority, are decent human beings. And when I ask that question, everybody, 99.9% of everybody raises their hands. Okay. And then I ask them a second question. How many of you guys believe that out of all those groups put together in a melting pot, we can acknowledge that there's a small negative exception of all those groups, which are in the hundreds of thousands or even low millions, that's raising all the havoc, causing all the negativity, causing all the chasms in our country. And we all raise our hand and say yes. And I say, where do law enforcement agencies select their applicants from? The American public. And I can assure you that the vast majority of people they select are going to be decent people. It's going to match our nation full of decent people. But every now and then, because of humanity, because nobody's perfect, we're going to get people on the job who are going to have those negative traits, apathy, racism, biases, and all these things. And when they rear their ugly head, of course, they impact us all. So people are people, you know, and most people are decent. Most people try to be decent, but every now and then people have human moments. And I don't think attacking people and demonizing or engaging in demagoguery against people is how we solve the problem. We solve the problem through having one-on-one dialogue with people. Why do you hate me? What is it you hate about me? And let's get to the root that way, rather than lumping people in a basket, because that's just as dangerous as what happened to me or my people as African Americans. They lumped us all in a basket and said we're all criminals, we're all this, we're all that, we're all stupid. And as a result, it put us back. It set us back. You know, now as an African American man, I don't want that to happen to anybody.
Sure.
Okay, we have climbed out of that ditch. We've fought. We've scratched. We've gotten to a place where we have our freedoms. Many of us are doing incredible things. But I don't want that to happen to another race of people. I don't care if their ancestors did oppress me.
Sure.
We have to look at the individual living now. We can't hold people to the fire for something they weren't directly involved in. Yeah. Sometimes it's not racism. Sometimes it's ignorance.
That's right.
I've noticed when I meet some people that it's not racism. It's because their lack of exposure to people in the African American community, or a lack of exposure to somebody in the Hispanic community or gay community, that causes them to say things that are hurtful. It doesn't mean they're evil. It just means they're ignorant. And when I say ignorant, that's not an insult. The term ignorance means you just don't know. Why? Because you haven't been exposed.
Of course.
And I find that when I'm able to talk to people like that, I discover they're not racist. They just don't know. And then when they get through talking to me, they have a whole new perspective on African Americans or police officers or anything when I humanize myself and we have those real one-on-one conversations.
You know, Deon, you bring up a great point, and I've been saying this, with my friend circle and my family circle and everyone else that I know, even at work. I've also mentioned that they describe Indians as slums, okay? Because that's what media shows. They show African Americans as a poor country, which is kind of not true. There are only certain percentage that it's poor, but the rest of them is not, right? And you have a person who's from Dubai who's rich, but then there are other places who are not. So I think it depends on what you want to show in public. And people are just not aware. So I think you are right. I think it's more on the media side of things. And that's where I think Back to Basics is trying to explain to people that racism, it's more stereotype and not racism, I think. This is how I feel.
Right. And I agree with you 100%. A lot of times, whether it be the media or politicians, they use race in a way that's either exploitive. It's all exploitive. All exploitive. Just like with the media, a perfect example. When I was a young African American male growing up in the 80s and 90s, all you ever saw about African Americans was that we were criminals.
That's right.
In the movies, we were pimps, we were hustlers. Every movie that came out about an African American was that we were gang members and struggling and drug dealers. Is there a small sect of our community that were struggling? Sure. I always call it the negative exception of any community. I never paint people with a broad brush, but you're forgetting to talk about the people who are doing incredible things. Like my father. My father, he came from the Jim Crow South. He came from a place of real tangible oppression. My father had to walk in the street so white people could walk on the sidewalk. My father had to ride on the back of the bus. My father had to walk barefoot 5 or 10 miles to school and have white kids throwing things at him and calling him the N-word all day. Okay. And if he was able to come through and become successful in life, why aren't you telling that side of the story?
Right.
Why aren't you telling that side? Tell that side so other African Americans, that negative exception, can look and say, you know what, it's possible for me to make it in this country. Maybe there aren't as many things holding me back as people say, because my father broke through all those barriers and broke through with ease because he had the will, the desire, he worked hard, he was honest. And he ended up being successful. Not just my father, my uncles, most of the men in my family have never seen a jail cell. Tell that story too. Don't just talk about, I don't want to see another episode of Roots. Okay?
Right.
That's
right.
Exactly. When I was a kid, that's all they showed about black people, is that we were slaves. Even when they were talking to us in history class, slave. But what they also didn't tell us, that we were inventors of monotheism. Okay, we were great inventors. They never told us about our ingenuity and how we're able to rise through and even take scraps and turn it into something incredible. These are things that you need to talk about with us as well, to show the younger generation that it's possible. A generation that has more advantages than even my generation. Okay, stop telling them that they're victims all the time, and tell them that they can be victors if you put forth little effort.
Yeah. Thank you again, Deon. I have one quick question, if you don't mind, before we get into the other part, which is your book also, which I want to talk about. But before we get into that, do you agree or disagree when somebody said to take the N-word out from the book Gone with the Wind?
Here's what I think. If that book was written based on a certain time, then I don't have a problem with it. If it's talking about, or if it's referencing a certain period in time, okay. I don't believe in editing and censoring time. I don't believe that. If that's what was happening back then, let it stand.
Right.
I think I'm smart enough and intelligent enough to know that was those times, and that word doesn't affect me like that as it would today. So stop trying to edit everything and sanitize everything for this society, and let history just stand so we can learn from it. If you erase history, how are you going to learn from it?
That's right.
Or how the hell are you going to learn from it?
Right.
So no, I don't agree with censoring books and things of that nature. I think it was who wrote Huckleberry Finn?
Yeah.
They wanted to censor his books because now they're too insensitive for the times. Stop doing that. Stop censoring books and let me decide, whether that's offensive to me, because I'm smart enough to know that was those times, and that's the way people talked back then.
Yeah, I don't agree with erasing history out. I think we should be learning from the history and making it better for our kids. Forget about us, because we're in a limbo between the old and the new. I think the new people, I should say the new generation, should be learning what we went through.
Exactly.
Do you agree
exactly.
with that?
And not in a way to make them angry. It wasn't done in a way to anger me or make me hate my country. It was just, this is what happened, but this is how far we've come. Yes, Americans were engaged in slavery, which is one of the most evil practices in the world. But also, America was one of the first countries to abolish it. And every American wasn't a slave owner, but they want to take one geographical area in America and say this was all of America back then. And no, there were people, white and black, who fought against slavery to abolish it. But don't just talk about the evils of slavery. Talk about the heroes who fought like hell to end it.
Exactly.
Talk about both, so people aren't bitter, so people aren't angry and hating the world through jaded lenses right now. This young generation is angrier over things that they've never even experienced, and that's crazy. I've experienced racism, and I'm not that bitter. Okay, these kids haven't been through what I've been through, and they're angry and bitter. It's like, what the heck's going on? So I think the way they're feeding history to them now is just creating more hatred, rather than bringing understanding.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's Mark Twain's Huckleberry Finn, by the way.
Mark Twain, that's what it's on the tip of my tongue.
And it was based out of the Civil War back in the days, so that's how it all started. Yeah. So thank you again for that.
Absolutely.
So Deon, can I talk about your book here? It's called Skid Row Cop Story, Volume 1. Explain that.
Stepping across the line.
Yeah,
stepping across the line.
Yeah, exactly. So explain that. How did this book start?
I started writing it about 10 years ago. Just something in my heart, just saying I wanted to tell my story, especially to young people of color who were thinking about being police officers, because our detractors were coming on so strong. What's happening now is not new. They were doing it back then, where they were saying if you become a black cop, you're going to have to sell your soul. You're not going to be black anymore. You're going to end up hating your own people. And I was talking to a young man, and he was just I want to be a police officer, but my family are going to hate me. I'm not going to be able to live I'm not going to be able to be invited to the cookout anymore. And I'm like, what? And I sat back and it hurt my heart that this good young man who would have been an excellent police officer chose to pass on an excellent career. So I'm laying on my bed and said, I need to tell my story. So 10 years ago, I started writing thinking nobody's going to care about this. Who's going to care about my story, right? But then throughout my career, I started doing some really incredible things as an African-American officer that no officer has ever done before, and I did it in this skin in a police uniform. So I wanted to share my story with the people of color and anyone for that matter thinking about being a police officer, that police work is what you make it, okay? And all this stuff about the blue wall of silence and all this crap, get rid of that. You be the police officer that you want to be. You be the change you want to see. And I made sure that I showed in my book that I never sacrificed who I was. I'm many things. I'm a born-again Christian. I'm a proud African-American man. Okay, I never sacrificed those things. I didn't become a police officer, put on a uniform, and say I'm not any of these things anymore. I brought all of that with me so I could help reach out and identify with individuals who did mistrust police officers. So the story is pretty simple. It starts out with me as a young man being raised by two parents who cared about people. They were about caring about people their entire life, raising 41 foster children, helping homeless people. That was how I grew up. And then I ended up losing my job. But I had a hatred for police as well. Just like many young African Americans, I was guided to the thought that law enforcement officers were my natural enemy. But then when I lost my job, I was out of work and I tried to find work. Nobody would hire me. Sure. So I had an uncle and a friend say, why don't you put your name in the hat for the police department? I was like, that police department? Oh, heck no. Did you see the Rodney King video? I'm not going to do that. So I ended up putting my name in the hat. I met my beautiful wife, who was my fiance back then, and I wanted to find a good career, take care of her. And the only job that called me was the police agency, and I wasn't happy about it. Matter of fact, the day I got the letter that I was accepted, 3 of my friends got up and walked out of our restaurant and never spoke to me again. Wow. Like, I ripped my skin off because I joined the police force and was stomping on my skin color to be a police officer, and that wasn't true. But anyway, what I learned when I got on the job is that 99.9% of everything they were saying about police officers was false. They were saying that I was going to be taught to target African Americans in the academy, that I was going to be trained that black people are enemies. We were taught the exact opposite in the academy. In the academy, we learned more about community relations and human relations in Spanish. We learned more of that than how to keep our head from being blown off in the street, because the department was trying to change. They were trying to get people to become more community oriented. They stress, don't lie, don't engage in brutality, because these are things that hurt us as a whole. And then I hit the streets and I ended up working with officers who were white, black, Hispanic, especially the white officers. I was nervous working around them because in my community, it's like the white officers. Oh, you work with the white officers. They're all a bunch of racists. And the first white officer, training officer I had, his name was Bill. And he was 6'4", blonde hair, blue eyed, the stereotypical picture of what a white racist cop looks like, big old handlebar mustache. And he policed the black community. And when I found out I was working with him, I was like, oh no, everybody's going to hate me in this community. And I'm driving through the community with this guy who arrested 2,300 people in this black area. And I'm like, they're going to hate me. They're going to shoot me. It's going to be bad. And I'm driving through and I'm seeing these people screaming his name from the rooftops. Hey, Snowden, how you doing? God bless you, Officer Snowden. And I'm sitting here like, look at this guy like, why do these people like you? You're a big old white guy. And then he pulls me over and he says, I see you have a question in your mind. I said, yeah. I said, how do these people like you when you've arrested most of them? He says, Deon, the job's what you make it. People here know they live in a high crime area. They know they have drug dealers and violent criminals here. All they want is whether we're counseling them, saving their lives, or arresting them, all they want is for us to treat them with dignity and respect. And as long as you're working with me, Deon, you will treat all of these people, no matter what color they are, with dignity and respect. And that was right up my alley because that aligned with the values my mother and father taught me. This was a white man who had more love from the black community than any cop I ever saw in history until I got into my own boots, okay, and started learning my job. But so I work with officers from the gay community, white community, Asian community, and none of these people hated black people. Of course, there's a negative exception. I've worked with those too, but that was a very small amount. So I wanted to show the world that most police officers are hardworking, decent people, sure. And you have, for the most part, you don't have anything to fear. and it's a noble profession. And then towards the end, I end up finding my calling by working in Skid Row with the homeless, a place I didn't want to go at first, but based on my upbringing, I realized I was home. And volume one kind of ends with the catalyst for how I went on to try to change Skid Row and make it create an environment conducive to change for the homeless community, so that the influence of the drug programs and the shelters and the great programs there can be stronger than that of the criminal element. That's going to be volume two when I finish that, and that's going to be pretty juicy and controversial, and that's why I probably have to wait till I retire. But
Okay.
but it's going to be amazing, because I want people to see that you can balance enforcement and community outreach, and it can work. And you'll find out who your real enemies are. The real enemies of public safety are individuals who have no interest in things being safe. There are people who don't want to end homelessness. They say they do. They sound good. They get millions and billions of dollars to stick around, and they get all that money, but not one thing changes. So they prostitute the image of poverty, right, to get funding and for changes that the community never sees. And on top of that, they make it 10 times worse. And in volume two, I'm going to explain that very thoroughly as to why it's so difficult for us to make things better for the homeless or anybody in troubled communities. So I'm looking forward to finishing that.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Hopefully, I can subscribe to your life and get the book every month or every couple of years. Thank you again, Deon, for that. And hopefully, we'll make arrangements to ship me the book, and I need an autograph from you for sure. Definitely, then I can sell it on eBay whenever that happens. I'm kidding. Okay, so do you think that you were blessed to have a partner, or I should say a partner in crime, which is Bill? Do you think that's a blessing? Or do you think if there was another person, let's say Ben, whoever that is, do you think your thought process for being a cop would have been different? Do you think?
Yes, if I would have ended up, because keep in mind, I was coming into the police force with already a negative taste in my in my own mouth about. I've been racially profiled as a young man. I've had negative contacts with police officers, so I came into the agency with already a bad taste in my mouth about law enforcement officers. So yes, if I would have ended up working with somebody who was the picture of everything that I feared, I probably would have quit the job. So I'm so thankful that my first training officer was a man who cared about his community. He believed in enforcement, but he also believed in treating people with dignity and respect. He set the tone for my entire career. And man, I implemented the things that he taught me, and my career took off. And I had the same respect in the community I served as he had when he was working in Venice Beach and Oakwood. Yes, it's very important who your first impressions in mentorship are.
Mentorship.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you again. Otherwise, because of Bill, you had a great career and still going on, and you're speaking well, and you're still doing that, and then you came on Back to Basics. So
yes.
I want to thank Bill for all the stuff that you do and what you did, and you're still doing it. So thank you again for that. And it seems like
every time I hear from Bill, I let him know that he changed my life. He changed my life, and I thank him for everything. And I'll let him know you said that.
Yeah, please. I would love to meet him sometime and dissect his brain as to how he was thinking back in the days, and he's still going on. So thank you for that, because there's a lot of hatred in this world, and it seems like we need to salute the good people around us, including you. So thank you for
Absolutely.
that.
Absolutely.
So Deon, before you leave today, any last words that you have for Back to Basic viewers and listeners that we have here?
Well, to your viewers, I want to say this. The world needs good people lovingly infecting every aspect of life. Now, I have a mantra that I live by as a law enforcement officer that helped me in my job, and I think it'll help you too. All you have to do is cut and paste the job and just add job description here. My mantra in working with some of the most marginalized people in society is this: my badge, my gun, my handcuffs, my baton will never, ever be my agents or mechanisms to invoke change or positive change in the lives of people that I serve. My heart, my faith, and my love for mankind will always be my unyielding dogs of war. And when I say that to myself every morning when I leave work, it forces me to lead with love. I'm firm. I'm very aggressive when it comes to fighting crime. I can't stand crime, but I also, because I can't stand crime, it doesn't mean that I hate criminals. Because I also know that a lot of criminals are human beings. A lot of them have experienced traumas in their lives, and I'm able to be patient with them and see them through the love of what I believe is God, and try to guide them in the right direction and lead with love before I have to slap the handcuffs on you. And I found that to be beneficial. So whether your job is a lawyer, a doctor, say that to yourself every day. Lead with love, and it helps you love everybody, no matter what color they are, no matter what their sexual orientation is. I have another saying: when I get to work, I leave my worldview at my locker. And what I mean by that is this: look, I am a born again Christian. I'm going to love Jesus till the casket drops. But if a Muslim, if somebody from the Hindu community, if a Jewish person, if an atheist needs my help, it is my job to go out of my way to serve them. I am straight, okay? But let me find out you hurt somebody from the LGBTQ community. You're going to have a 265-pound legal problem on your hands. I'm not going to allow you to hurt people because of who they are. I'm an American citizen and proud, okay? I believe in the laws of our land. But if I find out you hurt somebody because they're undocumented and you held their status over their head to continue to abuse them, I'm going to serve them like nobody's business. And when I added that to my life, when I added that to my mindset every day, it's made me not only a better police officer, but it also helped me outside of police work and make me a better person. Okay. And once again, all I'm trying to get your listeners to do is lead with love, no matter what your profession. And we can make the world a better place, far better that way than the way we're trying to do it right now.
Yeah, Deon, thank you so much for your last words and kind words to all the listeners here. And hopefully they will listen and they will make sure that they'll use that mantra every day of their lives. I know I will.
Absolutely.
And I will keep in touch with you and let you know that I did that. And thank you again for coming on Back to Basics.
Outstanding. God bless you. You take care, sir. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you again. So today we spoke with Deon today, and we talked about the basics of how to treat people, how to make people a safe place. And he's a citizen, he's a cop, he's a motivational speaker. But there's one thing that he is amazing guy. He's a author also. I think I should have added that in my intro, but he's an author too about his life, of what he does. And here's a quote of the day, and I think Deon might like this, so let's see here. True public safety requires a collaboration between law enforcement and the community. And that's what this quote is all about, and that's what he said too. So guys, as usual, as always, what do I always say at the end of my episode? Everything in life goes back to basics, and that's what we did today. Guys, take care, God bless, and keep on subscribing as much as you can. Keep on commenting, good, bad, ugly, ill way. It'll make my show awesome. And there are three things, as promised. What do I always say at the end? The content is going to be amazing. Guest is going to be amazing. But in this show, the best of all is the host. Guys, take care, God bless, and I will see you next week. Next week's episode on Back to Basics.
Feel confident wooing women from all over to come join tech. But at the same time, we do have to watch out for them. That over years, they aren't getting bogged down by administrative roles, by having to volunteer for more tasks that don't get them recognized, career opportunities that don't help them climb the ladder, and really watch out that they are able to fulfill their career ambitions, but also do meaningful work.
Yeah. So, Alana, from your findings, by the way, thank you again for that. So,